Mr. Ford tried to continue having theatre there after the Assasa. It'll be on our left. And where that fountain is, they have a lot of festivals here. They might have folk life dancing or food festivals, protests, all kinds of things happening on Freedom Plaza. And the Ronald Reagan building, as we cross the traffic light, look to your left. The Ronald Reagan building in the International Trade Center is the most expensive building outside of the Pentagon, $750 million. And that houses some of the government agencies now, like the EPA, and they have a lot of conventions there and big gatherings. Look to your left now. You see that rounded part? And Tom Cruise was filming in that space there, his latest movie, Minority Report. Yeah, something gay. Well, that building where the crane is, that's the district building where the mayor has his office. It's 100 years old, and it took him years to renovate. He moved in about a year ago. The Willard Hotel is coming up on your right. Now, on our immediate right is the Marriott, JW Marriott, the flagship Marriott Hotel. And then the Willard Hotel on the next corner on your right. That's a modern version. The Willard has always stood there. It was the poshest hotel even in Lincoln's time. And that's where Lincoln stayed as president-elect. And Coolidge stayed there as vice president. And many of them, nobody wanted to serve Coolidge. He was such a skinflint. He never tipped the waiters. So nobody wanted to serve him. There was a congressman from California who shot dead a waiter here at the Willard. You don't want to have breakfast there. He came down late and they said they wouldn't serve him. This was the middle of the 19th century. And he argued with them. He said he was on time. He just made the deadline. And they refused to serve him. So they started throwing cutlery and glassware, and they poured some molasses over him. And then he took out a revolver and he shot dead one of the waiters. He was acquitted, but his local hometown newspaper said that this man doesn't deserve to be in Congress. He never stood again. That all took place in the Willard. You know the expression lobbyist? That originated here. Ulysses S. Grant used to sit in the lobby here. And he was approached by many of these lobbyists, people who wanted jobs and influence and favors. And so as he was in the lobby, that's where the word came from. Very posh hotel today. I think if you go, where are you going? You're not going left. Oh, you want to do it that way? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The Treasury is on our left. This went up in the early part of the 19th century. And this is the continuation of the presidential inaugural route. The street we just came on, and then the president will normally walk this last part. Even George W. walked this part. And then they turn left into this extension on Pennsylvania Avenue where we were earlier. And that's the end of the inaugural parade. And he reviews the parade from there.
And then that guy told, oh, you have to go back down to the down by the monument.
now, as we turn, you'll see they've got Reagan's name up again. You see, Ronald Reagan Institute of Emergency Medicine. This is the spread out campus of George Washington University that we're going through now. They have a wonderful place for their commencement. They have it on the ellipse, which is on that huge stretch of lawn in George Washington, and that's where they had it. And when you're sitting there with the White House as a backdrop, there's really no better place than a commencement.
I will. Just keep your finger out.
I'm going to keep my finger
Yeah,
there.
but it makes it, your fingers, listen.
I was going to tell you what this is. Tell me where it's at. Panel number
55W.
I lost them.
Several Cuban children, from the parents had sent, like technically them sent them to school, but they were to keep
The bus had that.
Mm-hmm.
No, that curve is purgatory between heaven. When you cross from heaven and hell, then you
The president had to live somewhere. This is where he came to live. James and Dolly Madison lived here for 7 months. This is where he signed the Treaty of Peace with Britain, ending the War of 1812. You see above the pillars, that window, that's his circular study, his den, and that's where he signed it. They have the very desk on which he signed it. That's a beautiful museum today, open to the public. It's called the Octagon House. Would ferry goods up and down this canal. It goes for 180 miles north. But by the time they finished building it, the railroad was built. And so the railroad was faster and more reliable, so they never made a profit on the canal. But look at these great houses on your left. This is typically Georgetown. There's the Potomac River right ahead of us. And that's Virginia on the other side. We turn right. stores. Now I just
Okay.
or mostly just most places nice places to go. And here we are back at the White House. Is about 200 yards in front of us. You can't see it from here. But this big building on the right ahead of us is the Eisenhower Executive Office building. This was recently rededicated in Ike's name because this was the War Department when he worked here before World War II when he was a major. And so President Bush dedicated it a few months ago in Ike's name. And most of the people who work for the White House have their offices in that building. And that's where the National Security Council meets. The staterooms, out of the 132 rooms there's 7 that the public are allowed into. And those are all on the ground floor and in the basement. But in the second and third floor, it's only the president. Now the famous Lincoln bedroom is at the back on the left-hand corner on the second floor. And it wasn't Lincoln's bedroom. It was his secretary's offices. They call it the Lincoln bedroom because Harry Truman got a lot of Lincoln-era furniture and put it in there. And that's where the famous Lincoln bed is that Mrs. Lincoln bought for the guest room. It's 8 feet long, 6 feet wide. And that's a great, great honor to be given the Lincoln bedroom to sleep in. That's where Jimmy Carter's mother stayed on inaugural night. And it's haunted. If you read Nancy Reagan's book on the White House, it's called My Turn. She says that her stepdaughter, Maureen, was there, staying with her husband in the Lincoln bedroom. And they woke up at separate occasions on different nights, and they both saw this shadowy figure. And then, she says, President Reagan went there one day because during the daytime, the dog was barking non-stop, and the dog wouldn't cross the threshold into the room. So Reagan went down the corridor, and he looked in the room, and there was nobody there. And on another occasion, Nancy Reagan said she was straightening up a picture on the wall in the Lincoln bedroom, and a maid passed by and said, "Oh, he's been here again, the ghost." So many stories from that building. The Eisenhowers used to like to have the barbecues on the roof. I think it's such a beautiful building. A lot of Europeans say to me when they come now, "Oh, it's so small." Well, it's not meant to be a palace. It never was meant to be a palace. And they, in the 70s and 80s, they scraped away about 3 dozen layers of paint that had accumulated over almost 200 years. And now you can very clearly see this massive black scorch mark left from 1814. But turn around now, you see Andrew Jackson sitting on this horse. Physician was called Dr. Robert Stone, and his wife was Margaret Stone. She was embroidering a fire screen one day when a sculptor called Clark Mills turned up. He was a friend of the family, and he saw what she was doing, and he said, he saw that the embroidery, the picture there, was a horse rearing up on its hind legs. It had an oriental man in the saddle with a turban and a flowing cape. And he said, "When you finish, can I borrow that?" She said, "Why?" He said, "Because I've been asked to do something of Andrew Jackson. It may give me some ideas." So she lent it to him when she'd finished. She forgot about it. When she came to the unveiling of the anniversary of the Battle of New Orleans in January the 8th, 1853, they pulled off the sheet and she shrieked, "That's my horse, he copied it." And this is from a book that her granddaughter wrote. Andrew Jackson, this is this is the most amazing military victory in history. The British, after they finished with Baltimore, had been kicked out of there. They were going to try and capture New Orleans in 1815 in the winter so that they could control the traffic on the Mississippi. And so they descended there, and Andrew Jackson rounded up frontiersmen, ruffians, pirates, and militiamen, and he put them behind a makeshift rampart of wood and mud, bales of cotton and sugarcane. And facing him was the mighty British Army. This was forged through centuries of warfare. But
No, there's a light.
I will give you back your sword if you give me back my clothes. Unfortunately, they had to knock down an old building which stood here since 1836. It was a private home, a brick home, 3 stories, and it stood right there. During Lincoln's administration, it was the home, the rented home of his Secretary of State, William Seward. Now, John Wilkes Booth's plan was to kill the political leadership in Washington so that the South could rise again. So he targeted the President, the Vice President, and the Secretary of State. And his dream was that if he could accomplish that, the South would really make a comeback. It was a pipe dream, it was all over. But at the precise moment that Lincoln was shot, a co-conspirator, got off his horse here. His name was Lewis Payne. He was a tall, very strong man, and he was like a great white shark without emotions. He went into Seward's house, and the servant stopped him, but he pushed him aside. Now, Seward was in his 3rd floor bedroom overlooking the square. He was in very bad shape. He was almost killed a week earlier when he was in his carriage. The horses bolted. He was thrown out, and he broke his arm and fractured his jaw. He was in such bad shape he was writing on a slate. Instead, he wasn't able to talk properly. So this assassin went up the stairs, and he got to the top of the 3rd floor, and he was stopped by the Secretary of State's son, Frederick Seward, who was himself Assistant Secretary of State. And they argued. The assassin, the conspirator, was carrying a package which he said was medication that he had to deliver personally to the Secretary of State from the Secretary of State's private physician. The son asked him to hand it over and he refused. So they are apart from the very last building, which is the Treasury Annex. All of this is the federal judiciary now. But the corner building here was the home of that wonderful woman, Dolly Madison. This is where she lived the last 12 years on and off of her life until her death in 1849. And she was so popular. She was the most beloved First Lady ever to occupy the White House. I mean, Jackie Kennedy was admired and respected, but Dolly Madison actually beloved. She was a wonderful character. Nobody could say anything bad about her. And so people used to pay court. They used to come here, especially on New Year's Day, to see her and to wish her well, from the president on down. This is for decades after she left the White House. Daniel Webster described her, he said she's the only permanent power in Washington. But she had some bad luck. She had a scoundrel son from her first marriage. His name was Payne Todd, and he was a reckless gambler. Ran up thousands and thousands of dollars of debts, and his mother kept paying off her debts. Congress gave her $25,000 for her late husband's papers, and most of the money went to pay off his debts. And I have a letter from somebody saying that while she was dying, he was already taking the paintings out of this house. So he sold this house for $11,500. Just to give you some perspective on values. This was 1851. He sold it for $11,500. And she had converted from Quaker to Episcopalian, so they had the funeral service in the church that I showed you there. So this again today is part of the federal judiciary.
Do you have any other children?
No, just Payne Todd. James Madison never fathered any children, so with him they didn't have children. It's a really nice stretch over here, especially Benjamin Ogle Taylor's house. Beautiful house. They were going to knock down all these row houses at the beginning of the 20th century. They needed space for new government offices. And then, fortunately, World War I intervened in the Depression. But after that, they had the $30 million during Kennedy's administration. And Jackie Kennedy, if she's remembered for nothing else, should be remembered for saving this square. She saved all these buildings because she said, you cannot knock them down. They're part of our heritage. And so they put up the court building there. They lost one house, and across the road they lost 2 homes, but the rest were saved. Thanks for Jackie Kennedy. Okay, let's... the National Gallery of Art is coming up on our right. And that's the old master going up now. So ahead of us on the left-hand side, the offices are. If you stay in the right side. Long before you get into the Capitol building. And it's on this side, one ahead of us now, are the House office buildings. This is where the congressmen have their offices. Until you get to when William Howard Taft was president, all the trees were diseased, so they had to burn them and ask for the gift all over again. And this is what we have to get off behind that bus. Yeah, and then you could just move on. That's okay. So that's where we meet you then.
Here. There's one from over there. You know what I mean? Oh, with the man and the lady at the same time. So look. You want me to take a picture of that thing?
I want to get a picture of it.
It was in Korea, and they've all got ponchos because it was so bitterly cold there. Now there's a wall that's a reflecting wall, so 19 soldiers become 38 soldiers with the reflection, and 38 is symbolic of the 38th parallel that separates North and South Korea. And the artist who designed the wall was a helicopter pilot in Berlin when the Berlin Wall went up, and he vowed that if ever he had the opportunity, he would create a wall that united rather than divided. And so this wall, he put about 2,000 faces in the wall that look out at you. And your reflection identifies with them. And this is the whole idea, that you're bonding. So then they have, you'll notice also that there's a pathway leading up to a pool of remembrance. And on the walls of the Pool of Remembrance, you'll see the casualty numbers of the Korean War. Not only American forces, but the United Nations troops. So there was a little scandal here. The builder had tried to cut corners, and shortly after it opened, the paving started to crack, and they had to redo it. But finally, they got it right. And you might not at night time see the reflection in the wall, but at least you'll get a really good look at these 19 soldiers. Very realistic.
Boy, look at that flag. It hangs just so calm.
There would be covered by the name
Beautiful.
Yeah, it does a little bit. The 38 goes into 38. The reflections make it 38.
Yeah. 30, because there's 38 parallel.
38 parallel.
in the daytime.
Wavelength.
Oh, I didn't get it.
You did it. We'll get it.
What down?
That writing, you could read every bit of it. if you
Oh,
had
I
it.
can't get it that pretty.
Okay.
This is supposed to be a filming tour. We're staying at our same motel we stayed at.
Not all. There's 1, 2, 3 brave people. You're wrong. I'm not Amish. Okay, there's other options though, huh? How many of you think I'm a Mennonite?
No.
Yeah, you heard of the Mennonites? She's got her hand up. You're wrong. I'm not a Mennonite. How many of you think I'm just a tour guide who dresses this way to fool you tourists? That's wrong too. But we do have all of those in Lancaster County. Amish, Mennonites, and we have, take a right. With Amish and Mennonites and people who dress like Amish and Mennonites and just to make a little extra money. There's quite a few variety of plain people. You already know that though if you're from the Dakotas because we have quite a few of our people out there. When I say plain people, I'm talking about 3 specific different groups. And here in Pennsylvania, there are actually 48 different groups. But they all fall under one of these 3 categories, the Amish, the Mennonite, or the Brethren. I happen to be one of the Brethren. The church is called the Old Order River Brethren. We're much more modern than the Amish. I have a cell phone in my pocket, okay, and a computer in my briefcase, so I'm much more modern than the Old Order Amish. I drove here in a black Ford pickup truck to pick me up, not a buggy. My wife says I drive her buggy, but my wife is an angel, though. This group likes humor, so I'm going to... My wife is an angel. She's always up in the air harping about something, so... To which she would respond if she was here, ladies, do you know the difference between government bonds and men? Government bonds will eventually mature. The women like that one. Hold that. Hold that while I turn around and sit down. Presbyterian Church. That cemetery, the church goes back to 1724. Now the winery has been here a little later than that. Oh, to the winery. Okay. I'm sorry. I wondered if you had a tick or what it was. Bus driver, that's right. They're behind you all the way, too. Hey, look at this quilt up here. That's a pinwheel. Isn't that beautiful? Oh, my. Quilts are pretty around here. So much to talk about, so little time to get it done. You see a big sign up here like this that says Amish? There's no Amish there. That is owned by an Italian man from New Jersey, Chuck Ramito. The Amish village down on Route 897 or 896 is owned by a Greek family, or excuse me, a Jewish family from New York by the name of the Skiatis brothers. Yep, out to make a buck. That's the whole thing. So there's all these variety of places that have a big sign up that say Amish, and there's no Amish there. The Amish do not believe in using their church name to make money. They would say Jesus drove the money changers out of the temple, and we have no business in making our religion into a profit. But you will see on a brochure, in small words or letters somewhere, all of these quilts in a quilt shop are locally handmade by Amish and Mennonites. That's different than putting a big sign up that says Amish. Speaking of big signs that say Amish, here's this Skiatis Brothers Amish Barn Restaurant. There's no Amish in there. You notice they have hex signs and fancy and big letters that say Amish. No Amish in there at all. That's not a real Amish business. You can tell, for one thing, that they're open on Sundays. For another thing, that they have hex signs. We don't put hex signs up. That's not ours at all. Hey, look on the right here, though. Between the next buildings, you'll see a real Amish business. Right there is a buggy shop on the right. We're going to make a right hand turn here shortly. Beavertown Burgers. We're in the middle of a big drought. We're about 20 inches behind rainfall for the 2-year period. And we've had about 3 inches of rain in the last 3 weeks, which has helped. But before that, we were desperate for rain. More apples over here on the right. Got some nice size to them, too. Now, there's 48 different groups of Amish Mennonite brethren. That's hard for people to understand. If you can't understand that, how many different kinds of Baptists are there down south? Southern Baptist, Independent Baptist, Missionary Baptist, Free Will Baptist, Conservative Baptist, Primitive Baptist. Jimmy Carter's got his own group of Baptists. So there's all these different groups of Baptists, all coming from the same root, but all being a little different. Stop sign. Speaking of all these different groups, look here on the right. There's the Weavertown Amish Mennonite School. Actually, they call it Weavertown Mennonite School. I think these people have an identity crisis. Here's their church house right across the street. Very plain and simple, no stained glass, no steeple. They do have central air conditioning, though. No musical instruments, but that's Weavertown Amish Mennonite Church. I don't know why they have a Mennonite school and an Amish Mennonite church. Hey, there's a team out in the field with the disc on, right? What a view. Isn't that beautiful? But the Amish Mennonites, actually, to make you even more confused, we have a nickname for them. We call them the Beachy Amish. Here's a couple little kids, and everybody thinks our children are so cute. He's got his big brother's boots on the way it looks. You have to stop the video. So there's all these different groups, and I don't mean to confuse you, but we're going to try to, well, at least you'll remember that there's a variety of people. We're not all cut out of the same cookie cutter. We all go back to the early 1500s to a group called the Anabaptists. The Anabaptists. I didn't say anti-Baptist. I said Anabaptist, and that's not John the Baptist's wife either. Anabaptist is a German word that means those who baptize twice. They were baptized as children into the Catholic Church, and then when they grew up, they decided they didn't want to be Catholics. They wanted to be part of this new radical Reformation wanted to be part of a church where people could make their own decision to be part of a church and not be influenced, not be forced into it. Holy cow, there's cows out there. So, going back to the early 1500s, our people were known as, there's another team of mules on the right. There's a horse on the end. Straight on. Just a little bit slow pace in your business, not this house.
Shorts and boots are
I'll tell you more about that history in a moment, but I want to show you this beautiful home coming up on the right. This is typical of Amish architecture. Actually, what we call multi-generational architecture. You notice there's actually 3 homes here. The red brick one is the original. The little one on the right here, the white little one, is the Doughty house, or Rose Doughty house. Then there's another house, another white house on this end. All built at offset, or you know, a little bit further back from the road, so you can get light in all 4 sides of each home. That's important when you're Amish and you don't have electricity coming into your home to have that light there. But that home, the red part, was the original home built on the farm. And when Grandma and Grandpa Fisher got old enough to retire from farming and turn the farm over to a son, Elmer Fisher took over the property, and he moved into the big red house because his family was growing and getting larger. Grandma and Grandpa's family was getting smaller. Here's an Amish furniture store on the right, used furniture. Grandma and Grandpa Fisher moved into the into what they called the Doughty house. They built the Doughty house. Now, in German, Doughty means the grandfather. Gross Doughty, grandfather house. Take the right down here, the steps. They have a smaller house because their family's getting smaller. They don't have as big a need. It's just common sense. And then another son, Levi, decided he was going to build a place there on the home farm. They all worked together in the same farm, same shops. And eventually, bless you. Get any on you? Eventually, oh, we got a steamer up here, a dryer probably. Take a look on your left there. She's probably drying vegetables or doing something. I don't know what she's doing exactly, but maybe she's even canning. That might be a mobile canner. Hey, here comes an Amish convertible coming up on the left. Have you noticed that up here you see several buggies parked there? They've got lots of company. You'll see a van parked there. Yep, they've got family wagon, or church wagon. That has everything that the Amish need to have church meeting in it. The Old Order Amish worship in their homes. So do my group, the Old Order River Brothers. Here's the schoolhouse. Children out having their lunch. Came across the bus fax machine here a few seconds ago. Gentlemen, if you'll remove your hats, this is rather sad news. Dear friends, it is with the saddest heart that I pass on the following. Please join me in remembering a great icon, the veteran Pillsbury spokesman, the Pillsbury Doughboy, died yesterday of a yeast infection and complications from repeated pokes in the belly. He was 71. Doughboy is buried in a lightly greased and flowered coffin. Celebrities turned out to pay their respects, including Mrs. Butterworth, Hungry Jack, the California Raisins, and Betty Crocker, and the Hostess Twinkies and Captain Crunch. The grave site was piled high with flowers, F-L-O-U-R-S. As a longtime friend, Aunt Jemima delivered a eulogy describing Doughboy as a man who never knew how much he was needed. Doughboy rose quickly in show business, but his later life was filled with turnovers. He was not considered a very smart cookie, wasting much of his dough on half-baked schemes. Despite being a little flaky at times, oh, don't groan yet, it gets worse. Despite being a little flaky at times, he even still is a crusty old man, was considered a role model for millions. Doughboy is survived by his wife Play-Doh, 2 children, John Doe and Jane Doe, plus they had one in the oven. He is also survived by his elderly father, Pop Tart. The funeral was held at 3:50 for approximately 20 minutes. Since he was a Christian, we know he'll rise again. So, just thought I'd inform you that. Yep. No, I didn't make it up. It came from the internet. All right, so let's go out and turn left. About our people, some have a little bit more. Unfortunately, in a 5 or 6 hour tour, I can't get it all said, but I'm going to try to. I'd rather go with your questions if you don't mind me interrupting occasionally to point something out. Like this tractor repair shop on the right is Old Order Amish. Notice the gentleman in his lunchroom out here under the tree behind the tractor. There they're building onto the barn on the right there. Oh, there's so much to talk about. So little time, as I said. Now this house on the right is not Amish, it's English. Remember I told you we use the word English for non-Amish? You can tell the English house from the Amish house because the English house has the devil's horn sticking out the top. Television antenna. See, even though I'm very modern and have a cell phone and a computer and all that kind of stuff, I have no television and no time for it either. How's that? On the right, that's an Amish house. That line going into it is not electric. That's telephone attached to the chimney and going back to the back building so it can make phone calls. Here on the left, you can see the phone booth sitting in front of his shop there with an external ringer. The Amish do not have telephones in their homes. They have them out in a separate building. Good reason for that. The Amish are not dumb enough to think that there's some demon in the electric or telephone line. That's not it. They're also not dumb enough to think that there's some demon waiting for them. I said that, but they're not dumb enough to believe that everything invented before a certain time is righteous and everything after that time is unrighteous. That's not it. They're trying to preserve their Christian way of life. Look here at this farm on the left, the clothesline, one of the ladies was pointing out, but also look at the shop. It's a dairy farm, but look above the garage here, you'll see the shop with modern power tools in it, all powered by that diesel engine. The Amish use modern power tools, powered by the diesel engine, either air or compressed air, or sometimes hydraulic energy, sometimes even belt-driven. So they don't object to having modern things. They object to some of the effects modern things bring on them. To use power tools in the shop and to use an electric sewing machine hooked up to a battery, those are things for necessity, and they don't mind doing those things for necessity, to make a living and such. But to have a plug in the house that they can plug a radio or a television or a curling iron or some of these modern gadgets into, no, that would affect their family life and their personal life too much. Here's another Amish buggy we're passing here on the right. Notice this home on the right. A little slower pace once you get past it. The home on the right is old order Amish, beautiful and plain. The home on the left got the antenna sticking out the top of it and such. Did you notice that? Very different. Those happen to be blood brothers. They both got ground from their parents' farm to build a home on. One decided not to be Amish, never was Amish. He was born and raised in an Amish family, but he decided to be much more modern. That happens occasionally. I'd say maybe 10-15% of our children end up leaving the church. That means that 85 to 90% stay. But there's one case of brothers who get along very well. One's a deacon in the Amish church, one's a pastor in the Mennonite church, the more modern Mennonites. Down there on the right is a white deer. I can see him just at the edge of the shed. Can you see the white deer down there? There's a lot of other deer in there somewhere. Usually they lay in the high grass by the fence. We raised a lot of deer around here. They're better for people than the beef because of cholesterol problems, so it's becoming very popular. Another Amish schoolhouse on the right with the kids out playing. We have over 200 of these little Amish schoolhouses in Lancaster County. The wire mesh on the windows to keep rocks out, not to keep kids in. Hey, here's a Mennonite church house on the left. Notice the buggy shed behind it. In the 1940s and 50s, some of those people were old-fashioned enough to still drive the buggy. But now they're members of what we call the Lancaster Conference Mennonites, and they're much more modern. They drive cars, have electricity. Most of their older women still will wear a head covering, but as far as being plain, there's very little plainness left of the church. The women all cut their hair and wear jewelry and such, the more modern women, the younger women. So they're Mennonites. Mennonites worship in a church house. The Amish worship in their homes, generally. My church worships in our homes, too. Brand new Amish farm out there to the right, just split off the other farm and built the barn last year, building a greenhouse now. If you would have toured Lancaster County 30 years ago, I told you 90% of the Amish are farmers. Yep, there's a tobacco barn on the right, but there's a better one coming up on the left. Tobacco over here on the left, you can see the tobacco hanging in the barn, and you can see the doors open along the side to let the air in. To cure the tobacco. Tobacco is a great cash crop, and yes, there are Amish who grow tobacco, and Mennonites who do. In my church 50 years ago, well, I can't tell you that now. There's so much else to tell you. Here on the right is the old Wrestlers Roller Mill. Wrestlers Mill built in 1760. It's now a historic site. It's called a roller mill. It's called a roller mill because in the 1890s they took the stones out and put steel rollers in to grind, and they also put a turbine in to replace underneath to put the replace the water wheel. But it's still a water-powered mill. There's the mill darn on the other side of the screen there. We don't use that other word in Lancaster County. What happened when the fish ran into the stone wall? What did the fish say when he ran into the stone wall? Damn. Oops, said that. Sorry about that. Look at these beautiful Belgian horses coming up here on the right. Some farmers use mules, some use horses. It's entirely a personal preference. There's no religious reason one or the other. Some use mules, some use horses. Now, I was in the middle of the story, and I can't even remember what it was. Oh. Something about my church. Oh, I told you that approximately 90% used to be farmers. Today, it's only 50% of the Amish around here are farmers. The other are business people who own gift shops and quilt shops and machine shops and repair shops, all those kind of things. Notice out here on the right, see the little telephone booth out by the horses? That telephone serves two brothers, one who lives in the front house here and the mother and father and another brother who lives back in the back house. So 3 families actually share that phone booth. I was telling you about my church and tobacco. 50 years ago, if you were a farmer in my church and you grew tobacco, you would be considered, if you did not grow tobacco 50 years ago, you'd be considered lazy. Today in my church, if you're a farmer and you grow tobacco, you're considered sinful. See how things have changed? They're changing slowly among the Amish, but it's very difficult for them to give up the cash that comes from a tobacco crop. And I can't be too condemning of them because, after all, I was paid for with tobacco money. I was born in July, and the doctor didn't get paid till February when the tobacco check came. I mean, what can I say? Taking a right down here. How nice and slow. Oh, I hate to see that. Straight ahead of us is an Amish quilt shop and such. We're going to another one later today. And there's an ambulance parked in there with the lights going. Now, we're taking a right. We're not going to that one, but still. Hey, there's a mixed herd of dairy cattle. Most of the cows you've seen so far have been Holsteins. We need to slow our pace just a little bit so we can see things. There, yeah, there's a pumpkin field out there on the left. On the right is this mixed herd of dairy cattle. You'll see some Jerseys and Guernseys and brown Swiss. You'll even see a couple of what we call Dutch belted Galloways. You know what they are? Cows that are black on both ends but a white band around the belly. They're a subdivision of the Holstein, and yes, that's where we get the milk for the Oreo cookies. There are about 2 of them in there. Coming up on the left, though, you'll see a Amish cemetery. Some freshly dug graves here. I attended a funeral here last week for one of my better friends, Abner Byler. There's his mound of dirt. Abner was an 87-year-old widower who was a dear friend of mine. I'm going to miss his hugs. But we bury in a 6-sided wooden coffin. We do not have the funeral in a funeral home. Generally, the funeral director embalms the body, delivers it back to home, where they're bathed and prepared for burial, dressed by their loved ones. Buried in the 6-sided wooden coffin, usually not even anything but a pine rough box. Here on the right, the children are playing ball at the Amish farm. And on the left, that barn was just recently replaced. That was burnt down, and it took about 3 days till we cleared it off, and then about 10 days later, he had a barn up. It was back to milking again. No insurance company involved. Anyhow, the funeral director embalms the body, delivers it back to the home where they're prepared for burial by their loved ones and laid out at home. A lot of the things we do as plain people, Amish, Mennonite brethren, are not things we invented. They're things we preserve. You understand the difference? We didn't invent the head covering for our women. If you go back in your family a couple of generations, you'll see that every woman would cover her head when she goes to church. If you remember your grandmas. How many of your grandmothers wore slacks? Huh? They'd never consider it. No. You see, we didn't invent these things. The one-room schoolhouse, how many of you went to one of them? We didn't invent those, but we preserve those old-fashioned ways because we see some value in them. We think it helps us keep our Christian values and keeps our family in the church and in decent Christian moral standing. Now, I am the world's best expert on my own opinion. I'll admit that, okay? So I'll give you a lot of my own opinion, and I'm not here to make you agree or disagree with me, but I am here to just express my own opinion. Coming up on the right is the Laycock, not Laycock, I'm sorry, I gave you the wrong name. Leola Mennonite Church. Very plain and simple. Leola. You're from Leola? Really? Leola's just a mile down that way, to the left. Oh, Leola, South Dakota. Okay. We'll be making a right at the top of the hill. But got a beautiful view up here, so you can take your time making the turn. What point was I trying to make again?
Your opinion.
Oh, my opinion, yes. My opinion about these old-fashioned ways. Obviously, I'm much more modern than the Amish. I drive a truck, I have my telephone, that kind of thing. I'm not bragging about that. I'm just telling you. Oh, my. Smell that? Can you get a whiff of that? It's our fresh Lancaster County dairy air. Dairy air. Yes. Green window shades. That is quite a common thing around here among the old order Amish, but it's dying out, believe it or not. Seeing more and more curtains. Yes, that's liquefied cow manure. Isn't it wonderful? Smells like money to me. You'll find... Well, why would it be green? Because when those window shades were invented, that's the only color they had. But wait a minute, let me finish one thing and then the other. The green window shade, when the window shade, how many of you remember the window blind when it first came out was always green, right? Then it wasn't until the last 20 or 30 years they started making them in white, yellow, and all the other colors. Well, the old order Amish here in Lancaster County put window shades, but you notice there's curtains upstairs here behind the window shades. Not unusual to find that in an Amish home now. 25 years ago when I first started tour guiding, there were no curtains in an Amish home, just the window shades. But see how things have changed? In Ohio, the tradition there is to have a single piece of material that you pull to the side and tie with a bow, what we call the old Empire-style curtain. They felt that was more simple and modest, and so they did it. The Amish here felt that the window blind was more simple and modest. Each group has their own rules and regulations for the group. As I say, we have some basic tenets that have come from the Bible that we all believe, but there are some things where the Bible is silent and a group makes their decision as an individual group. We believe that as Christians, we belong to the body of Christ. And to find God's will for our lives, we allow the church to make the decision. Perhaps if I tell you, we're going straight on. That's all right. This is a good pace. If I tell you how the telephone got out in the little telephone booth, maybe you'll understand how we make decisions. Most people have the misconception that we have a hierarchy of bishops that tell us what to do. Turn right now, turn left then, and don't do this and don't do that. That's not true. We believe that we are the body of Christ. The minister or the bishop might be the head of the body of Christ and have the position of the leadership, but it is not his right or responsibility to tell everybody to what to do. We vary what we do, and we decide as a group what we do. So when the telephone first became popular in America, there were Amish who had telephones in their homes when it became available around here. And some thought there was no problem with it, others thought we shouldn't have it. And so they had a church council about it. Now, we have what we call visiting brethren. Our ministers come every year in the springtime and visit every home in the church. That's the time when we can encourage them, they can encourage us, we pray together. Are there concerns? Do they have concerns about me and how I'm living my Christian life, or my children, or whatever? Do they have concerns about something? And do I? I'm thinking of right here, sorry for not telling you. They'll tell me, and we can encourage each other, admonish each other. If I have a concern about what's going on in the church, it is my right to say, I think our dress styles are just getting too fancy and the skirts are getting too short or whatever. I have a right to express that. And if there's several people who express an issue and they think it's important enough, it will come to the church council meeting. Now, many Protestants in America, your church councils are a group of men or women who decide what to do, right? Our church council means that the entire church comes together and has a council. The council is the type of meeting where we all talk about our problems and get to express our opinions. When the telephone came up, it came to church council, and the ministers were charged with preaching at that church council meeting on anything that the scripture tells us about the telephone. Somebody's laughing. They think the scripture doesn't mention the telephone. Well, it doesn't. You're right. But it does say how we should communicate. It says we shouldn't gossip. I'm talking about malicious gossip, the kind of, the Bible listed right up there with the murder and adultery. And we'll stop here and straight across twice. Notice the tractor coming up here on the right. Modern tractor, steel wheels, and there's more and more rubber tires these days, but he has it up here for the silage, to chop silage. Of course, the corn that was chopped, the heifer, they're getting into that now, enjoying that. harvest the corn with the corn binder and throw it in there to chop it up, throw it up into the silo. Back to what I was saying about the telephone. So they had the preachers preaching on the verses that had to do with communication. The Bible says, let your yea be yea and your nay, nay. It also says that we should be honest and we should speak the truth in love. There's many things that the Bible says about communication, and that's what the preaching was on. And the Amish, well, even my group, we like to ask the question about these modern things. If we adapt a modern thing, if we have a telephone, if we drive a car, if we do this, how will it affect our lives in 5 years, in 10 years, in 50 years, in 100 years? Will our children and grandchildren still be Amish, or will they still believe what we believe? Look at it right up here. Now, I know that's unpopular among a lot of people to think that way. At least most of Americans don't think that way. Most American people think, boy, if it's new, I got to have it. I got to have the latest version of Windows for my computer. I got to have the latest this, the latest that. They don't say, well, have we got along with it without it for all these years? Why do we need it? They just say, I got to have it. We look at it and say, how will it affect our children? How will it affect our church life? And so the debate's going on about the television, the ministers preached, and then the men get to stand up and give their opinion. They've talked to their wives about it the night before or the day before. When they come to council, they have their wives' opinion. Women do not speak in church council meetings. They have the perfect right to express their opinion through, yes, we're old-fashioned enough to be male chauvinists. You know, the Bible does say that women don't speak in church meetings. There, on the right, there is an Amish church, or schoolhouse, excuse me again, and an Amish convertible. Now, our women do give their testimony and that kind of thing, and, you know, and we believe that they're equal in standing before God. They're not lesser than us. We just have the role and responsibility of leadership. Back to what I was saying. So then the men got to speak and express their family's opinion about the telephone. Those who were against it got up and said, you know, the Bible says, literally, we should not connect ourselves to the world. King James would say, come out from among them and be separate. But the Martin Luther translation in German, which most of our people use, literally is translated, do not connect yourself to the world. Become part of the world. And some of them, not everybody, but some felt that they'd be part of the world system. Oh, look at this on the right, a steam engine out there. Yes, we still do use steam engines. There's no frick. The steam engines are used for steaming the soil for tobacco beds. We bear to the right up here. Steaming the soil for tobacco beds, also for thrashing grain. We still thrash grain. Got a better view, a close-up view of a corn binder coming up here on the left. That's one with a stainless steel chute on it. That's a modern one, powered by a gasoline engine. It's difficult to do this job because I can't get to finish any of my stories without this stuff interrupting me. Back to what I was saying. Some objected to being connected to the world. Some said, you know, with this telephone ringing, it's going to disrupt our family life. People are going to try to be selling us stuff, and it'll ring during supper time, it'll ring during morning prayers and evening worship. We don't want that. Still others said that, you know, there's going to be more gossip going on. If you're not looking face to face, maybe we could lie to somebody. Now, you might think that's funny, but think about it. When did they invent the statement, the check's in the mail? After we had the telephone, right? I have a telephone, so don't judge me yet. But the people we're going to visit now, Levi and Lydia, they have a telephone, but it's out in a separate shed in the building. I don't know about you, but I often wish when mine rang at midnight, that it was out in a separate shed in the garden, and I didn't hear it. After midnight, when it rings, I don't answer hello. I say, who died? Back to what I was saying. Then those who were for the telephone got on there and said, hey, listen, more and more of us are businessmen. We need the telephone for communications as businessmen, to order equipment, to order materials, to take orders from our customers. And you're going to let up here in front of that house on Southwestern Road. And that's one point. They also said, what if Uncle Jake has a heart attack? What if the barn catches fire? Aunt Ruth breaks her hip. We need the telephone to get an ambulance or a fire truck. And so one thing leads to another, and there's a division. Eventually, if the two groups can't get along together, there might be a split. And instead of 48 different groups in Lancaster County, we have 49. One with telephones and one without. So what are we going to do? How do we solve the problem? Some wise old bishop came up with a compromise. He said, hey, why don't we put the telephone out in a separate building? It won't be disrupting family worship and prayers. It won't be there so people bothering us all the time. If a person's a businessman and wants to get his phone hose, he can put an external ringer on it. Doesn't this solve the problem? Nobody's going to sit all day in that little telephone booth and gossip. It's not convenient. Somebody said, that's a wonderful idea. Let's compromise and do it that way. And when you fully explain it to people, it makes sense, doesn't it? I think it makes sense. Here on the right and left are Amish homes. Not the next one on the left, but both of these on the right and left. Yes, they have visitors in there. Here on the right, look under the tree there. See the telephone booth? So you might think some people think they're stupid. Some people think, oh my goodness, how could they be so dumb to do such a thing? But really, it has some good reasons behind it. Well, not always. Most homes have their own telephone now. Years ago, it used to be that several homes in the area had one, but now almost everybody has their own. But you're right, it used to be. Now, if there are family or close neighbors living beside each other, they might have the same phone and share it. But that's not as much as it used to be. Things are changing. We want to make a right up here. Up the hill. Hey, now, I don't want anybody to look at this. Everybody close their eyes. Everybody but you. Okay? Close your eyes. Driver, keep your eyes open. I don't want you to see this mess here on the left. Reminds me of West Virginia. Did you hear about the tornado that went through West Virginia and did $1 million worth of improvements? And we need you all to reach up ahead of you and grab the seat or the rail in front of you and give a little push. Help us up the hill. Got a hill in front of us. We get snow here, yes ma'am, but not a lot. Last year we had a couple of traces of snow, nothing real measurable. Quite often, I mean, our average is 16 to 20 inches a year. Not much at all, and it doesn't last long. We're in a very moderate area. In fact, you're less than 70 miles from the ocean right now. So, very mild climate. Slow her down a little bit. How many of you brought a camera? I see this gentleman up here has a camera. Yep. You want a picture of a pretty view to remember this countryside? You don't? There's a gorgeous view here. Don't fall over the cliff. Now, this is a private school and church here. These people broke off the Old Order Amish. They're one of the 48 different groups, Summit View Christian Fellowship. So if their children are out, don't take pictures of them. But this view here is just absolutely gorgeous. Thought you might want a picture of that. Let's take 4 to 5 straight from the water. He laid down his club, held up his arms. The water parted. The ball went across on dry ground right up onto the green. Then Jesus got up, took his shot. The ball headed straight for the water. So he laid down his club, held up his arms, and the ball walked on the water right up onto the green. The old man that was with him got up, took his shot. Before anything else could happen, though, a squirrel ran out, grabbed the ball, ran away. Then an eagle flew out of the sky and grabbed the squirrel in its talons and flew away. A lightning bolt hit the eagle. The eagle and the squirrel fell dead on the green beside the flag. The ball rolls out of the squirrel's mouth into the cup, hole in one. Moses turned to Jesus and said, that's the last time I'm golfing with your father. I don't get angry about much, but when I see this kind of thing on the right here in America, I'd like to know. There's no place for displaying the Confederate flag today except museums. I told you I was the world's best expert on my own opinion. That's quite a crop. We have over 500 farmers in Lancaster County growing it. Last year, $20 million worth of tobacco grown here. Some of the best cigar wrapper tobacco and much of the cigarette tobacco, including nicotine-free, is grown here. A farmer can make $12,000 to $15,000 on 3 to 4 acres of tobacco. It is a lot of work, but more tobacco on the left, yep. Most of the tobacco is harvested by this time. In fact, you can look in here to the left and see some of the harvest going, the tobacco hanging. You said, what about Intercourse? How did that town get its name? It was not a picture in front of the hotel. I want you to know that. It was because 2 major roads come together. If you remember, I told you earlier about the old Pennsylvania Turnpike, the Philadelphia Turnpike. It meets in that village with the old Kings Highway. Where those 2 roads cross is an intercourse or intersection. 2 roads, a road is a course in old days, and that's why how it got its name. Coming up on the right, the Weaver family had some leftover vegetables 30 years ago and didn't know what to do with them. So they set a card table out under these maple trees, not this first tree here, but down a little further. They set some card table out with their zucchini and corn and sold it, and it did good. So the next year they planted extra, and eventually it became Shady Maple Farm Market. Built a little shed there. Now it is the largest grocery store in the state of Pennsylvania. 38 aisles of groceries out here in the country, the Shady Maple Farm Market. His brother-in-law said, hey, if you can do so good with the Shady Maple Farm Market, I'm going to build a hardware store and dry goods. We call it the Mennonite Kmart, goods store out to your right. And then they went together, both of them, and built a smorgasbord restaurant. Well, they only had 600 seats, and it wasn't enough. So people come from miles to eat here because of these good Mennonite cooks, and so they decided to build a new one. If you look back between the buildings, it's been open about 2 years. Shady Maple Smorgasbord, 1,999 seats, just short of 2,000. On here, look at that. Yeah, they changed it. They moved it, yep. Country store there. But right in the back is their new 2,000 seats. Well, he wanted to make 2,000 seats, and the government would only approve him for 1,999. He was a little upset about it. And it's closed on Sundays for large. 8 to 10 children is average. I have a neighbor that has 18 children. I have another neighbor that has 21. The 21 is a case of a widow that married a widower, but still, yours, mine, and ours. But so with large families, you need your clothes to dry fast because you're doing a lot of laundry. If you hang it up in the air like that on a pulley system, it dries faster. If your husband or your neighbor spread manure, you'll be glad it's up where the wind's blowing. And also, if there's a foot of snow on the ground, the lady can still stand on her porch and put her laundry on the ground, on the line. So there's no religious significance for it, but obviously there's a good reason for it. There's the little town of Goodville. We don't have to come by this way, but it's sort of fun to go right through the middle of the farm, I think. Drivers don't, usually. Just take your time on this road, you'll be fine. He gets his pigs delivered to the farm here and taken out of the farm on this road in a tractor trailer. So if he can bring a load of hogs through here, whoops, I'm sorry.
How many folks is it?
I'm going to put a bridge here.
Home of Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence was signed. And Liberty
Too
Bell.
far. It's real far.
This is the Delaware River. This will run up north, or run down south, whichever way.
Yeah, we're in for the sun. That camera, I realize we're going to go up all the time. We're up pretty high. Oh, pretty that little island.
Just noticing over here to the left, I don't know if you realize this barricade between us, right to the left. I didn't know that'd get him excited, but anyway. This barricade here on the left is what they call a zipper. And why do they call it a zipper? There's a machine that'll be sitting on either end of this that can zip this and move it over so there's one lane coming across the bridge this way and 2 lanes out so they can move it back and forth. There's one in D.C. I just didn't get a chance to tell you because somebody else was talking at the time, but there's This just moves with the machine, and they can drive right over the top of it, move it right to where they need it to move it to.